My stepmom and stepbrother framed me. Then, karma hit hard. Before we begin the story, take a moment to support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Your support means the world to our channel and helps us spread more shocking true stories to light. Now, let's get started. I've been going back and forth about whether to post this, but honestly, I need to get this off my chest. My life has been one massive dumpster fire that somehow turned into something decent, and the way everything unfolded is just too wild not to share. So, here it goes. I'm 21, male. My life took a nosedive years ago, but the real downward spiral began when my dad met her. Let me take you back to where it all started. A family torn apart before it even began. When I was 8 years old, my mom left the house on an ordinary Tuesday to run an errand, just a quick trip to the store. She never came back. A car accident took her away from us, and just like that, my entire world collapsed. For the next 2 years, it was just me and my dad. He was only 44 at the time, still young, but suddenly a single father trying to keep everything together. We weren't exactly living the dream. Our home turned into a bachelor pad filled with frozen dinners and pizza boxes, but we managed. More than that, we had each other. Then Valeria came into the picture. She was 41, elegant, and always had this fake sweetness about her that my dad completely fell for. He met her at some business function, and from the moment she walked into our lives, everything changed. My dad was obsessed, like head over heels, can't see straight kind of obsessed. It didn't take long before she and her son Liam moved in with us. That's when my home stopped feeling like home. Liam was my age, 21. But from the second he stepped through the door, it was clear who the real son was in Valeria's eyes. And worse, my dad was too busy running his business to see what was happening right under his nose. At first, it was little things, subtle shifts in the atmosphere. But before I knew it, I wasn't just an outsider in my own house. I was enemy number one. The takeover begins. 2 weeks after they moved in, I walked into my room and stopped dead in my tracks. Everything was different. Valeria had rearranged the entire house, including my room. She threw out some of my things without even asking, including an old baseball my mom and I had caught at a game years ago. It was one of the last things I had to remind me of her. I felt sick. When I confronted her about it, she didn't even pretend to care. She just rolled her eyes and called me dramatic, saying I needed to make room for the family. I turned to my dad, hoping for some kind of backup, some kind of acknowledgement that this wasn't okay. But all he did was shrug and say, "She's just trying to make the place nice, buddy." That was the moment I realized I was on my own. And this was just the beginning. The lies begin. Liam wasn't just some annoying stepbrother. He was a snake. A sneaky, manipulative little prick who knew exactly how to play the game. The first time he set me up, we were 12. My dad had this expensive watch, one he really valued. One day it went missing. And guess where it magically turned up? In my backpack. I had no idea how it got there, but Valeria acted like she knew I was guilty before I even opened my mouth. "My son would never do something like this," she said, shaking her head with a look of utter disappointment. "But you? I'm not so sure." I tried to explain, tried to tell my dad that Liam must have put it there, but he wasn't having it. "You need to stop blaming your brother," he sighed, looking more annoyed than angry. "You need to take responsibility for your actions." And just like that, I was grounded for a month. Meanwhile, Liam smirked behind my dad's back, enjoying every second of my humiliation. That was the pattern from then on. Liam would pull some stunt, pin it on me, and Valeria would back him up. My dad, too distracted, too in love, too blind, would believe every word they said. By the time we hit high school, Liam had perfected the art of ruining my life. He'd steal money from Valeria's purse, then suddenly, I'd have an extra $20 in my wallet. He'd bomb a test, and somehow a crumpled copy of the answer key would appear in my backpack. It didn't matter how many times I pleaded my case. It didn't matter that I had zero reason to do these things. Dad wouldn't even listen. "I don't want to hear you blaming your brother again." Again, like I was the problem, like I was some lying, troublemaking burden he had to put up with. But the punishments weren't the worst part. The worst part was watching the man who raised me, the man who taught me to always tell the truth, slowly start looking at me like I was nothing more than a disappointment. The favorite son. By the time college applications rolled around, the favoritism wasn't even subtle anymore. Liam got a private tutor to help with his essays and SAT prep. Me? I had to figure everything out on my own. When he got into our state college, barely, Valeria threw a massive party like he had just won a Nobel Prize. When I got into a better school with a partial scholarship, barely a nod of acknowledgement. Not that it mattered. I couldn't afford to go. Valeria had made it crystal clear that they wouldn't be helping with my tuition. College isn't for everyone, she'd say in that fake, syrupy voice of hers. Maybe you should consider trade school instead. There's nothing wrong with trade school. But coming from her, it wasn't advice. It was an insult. She didn't think I was worth investing in. Still, I refused to let them break me. I enrolled in community college and worked part-time at a hardware store, saving every penny I could. One more year, I told myself. Just one more year of saving, and I'll be out of this house for good. But Liam and Valeria, they had other plans for me. The perfect setup. Liam was failing out of college. Shocking, right? He had spent his first year partying instead of studying, and now he was on academic probation. Valeria was losing it. She had spent years bragging to her friends about her genius son, and now her golden boy was about to get kicked out. Meanwhile, Dad was drowning in stress. His business was going through a rough patch. Money was tight, and the tension in the house was unbearable. And there I was, working steady hours, saving money, and passing my classes. I should have known that was a problem. Liam had been suspiciously quiet for about a week. And Liam was never quiet unless he was plotting something. Then, one evening I walked through the front door, and everything exploded. The accusation that ruined everything. The second I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. Dad's face was red, his fists clenched. He looked like he was about to have a stroke. Valeria was screaming into her phone, pacing the room like a lunatic. And Liam? Liam was sitting on the couch, completely calm, watching everything unfold with this weird look on his face. That alone set off alarm bells in my head. Then Dad spotted me. He lunged across the room, grabbing my shoulders so hard it hurt. "Where is it?" he demanded. I had no clue what he was talking about. "Where's what?" I asked, trying to step back. Valeria slammed her phone down and spun toward me. $52,000. Her voice was dripping with rage. "It's gone, and we know you took it." My brain short-circuited. $50,000. Apparently, Dad kept emergency cash in a safe for the business. Old school habit, I guess. And now, it was gone. And just like that, they decided I was the thief. Liam spoke up then, his voice soft, concerned, fake. I don't want to say anything, but I saw him messing with the safe yesterday. I swear, if looks could kill, Liam would have dropped dead on the spot. But it was too late. Dad's expression turned ice cold. The man who had raised me, who used to call me his best buddy, was now looking at me like I was garbage. Framed. I tried to explain. I hadn't even been home that day. I'd been at the library with my friend Jake. But Liam had thought of everything. "Oh, he could have taken the money before he left," he added, shrugging like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Then Valeria pulled out the final nail in my coffin. A spare key to Dad's office safe, found in my desk drawer. A key I had never seen in my life. And just like that, my fate was sealed. Valeria tore through my room, throwing things left and right, searching for evidence. She finally found something, a receipt for a storage unit in my jacket pocket. A jacket I hadn't worn in weeks. Dad's face darkened even more as Valeria waved the receipt in front of him like it was some kind of murder weapon. I was officially screwed. I tried calling Jake, begging him to back me up, to tell them I'd been at the library with him. But Valeria was already 3 steps ahead. "Of course his friend will lie for him," she sneered. "That's what criminals do. They cover for each other." Dad just nodded along. Like this made perfect sense. Like it was all so obvious. I was desperate. I kept repeating myself. Over and over, I didn't take the money. Check my bank account. I don't have anything. But Valeria twisted that too. "Oh, please. He's not that stupid, Mark." She smirked at my dad. Obviously, he wouldn't put it in his bank. That's why he has the storage unit. I felt like I was drowning. This was too perfect, too planned. I could see it now. Liam had set this up from the second he realized he was failing. He needed a distraction. He needed me gone. And it worked. Dad's voice was flat, emotionless. "Pack your things." My stomach dropped. "Dad, please. I can't have a thief under my roof." Just like that. Like I was some stray dog he'd grown tired of. Thrown away like trash. I packed. What else could I do? I stuffed some clothes into my backpack, grabbed my laptop, took the only photo of my mom I had left. That was it. I had $60 in my pocket, no car, nowhere to go. As I reached the front door, Liam stepped in my path. He leaned in close, just low enough so Dad and Valeria couldn't hear. "Sucks to be you," he whispered, smirking. "Maybe you should have been nicer to me." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about covering his tracks. This was payback. For every time I stood up to him. For every time I refused to let him walk all over me. For every time I saw through his bullshit. He wanted me gone. And now he had won. I pushed past him and walked out the door without looking back. I made it to the end of the driveway before stopping. I turned around and stared at the house, the only home I had ever known. It felt smaller now. Like it wasn't mine anymore. Like it never had been. I should have seen it coming. Should have left sooner. Should have known that in this house, I was never going to win. But as I stood there, alone in the dark, I made myself a promise. This wasn't the end of my story. Not by a long shot. The first night of hell. Getting kicked out of your own home is one thing. Realizing you have nowhere to go, that's another level of hell. That first night, I wandered the streets for hours, my backpack slung over my shoulder, my mind racing. Every time I pulled out my phone, my thumb hovered over my dad's number. I wanted to believe this was just some insane misunderstanding. That he'd come to his senses and call me back, tell me to come home. But I knew better. He wasn't going to call. So I did the only thing I could. I found a bench at a park near campus and sat down. It was March, still cold at night. I pulled my hoodie tighter around me, trying to stay warm, but every gust of wind cut straight through me. I barely slept. Every sound, footsteps, rustling leaves, the occasional passing car, made me jolt awake. A raccoon sat on a trash can a few feet away, staring at me like it knew my life had just completely imploded. By morning, I was exhausted, freezing, and feeling like absolute garbage. But the worst part? Reality had finally set in. I was homeless. Rock bottom hits fast. The first thing I did was try calling my dad. Straight to voicemail. I texted him instead. "Dad, please, can we talk about this?" I stare at my screen, hoping, praying, for even the smallest sign that he still cared. A minute later, the message bubble popped up. My heart pounded. He was actually responding. Then I read his reply. "Return the money or don't call me again." I just stood there, gripping my phone, feeling like the ground had been ripped out from under me. So that was it. This wasn't just a 24-hour punishment. This was real. I was really on my own. I had no clean clothes. No shower. I couldn't go to class looking like I'd slept outside. I tried washing my face and hair in a gas station bathroom, but the attendant caught me and kicked me out. Called me a bum. Threatened to call the cops if I didn't leave. And then, as if things couldn't get worse, my phone started blowing up with texts. From Liam. "How's the streets, bro? Should have been smarter. Dad's trashing your stuff today. Hope you didn't leave anything important." Each message felt like a punch to the gut. I had $47 in my bank account. No place to sleep. And my own father thought I was a thief. And there was nothing I could do to prove otherwise. Surviving the first few days. That day, I walked around campus, watching people go about their normal lives like everything was fine. Like my life hadn't just completely fallen apart. I spent the entire day in the library, just to be somewhere warm. But when the library closed, I had nowhere to go. I tried sleeping in a 24-hour McDonald's, buying the cheapest thing on the menu so they wouldn't kick me out. It worked, until the manager noticed me nodding off and told me to leave. I wandered into a parking garage and tried to sleep in a stairwell. Even worse than the park bench. Concrete is not made for sleeping. My back ached. My head pounded. My stomach growled. By the third night, I almost cracked. I stared at my dad's number on my phone, thinking about what would happen if I just lied. If I told him, "Fine, I took the money, here's where it is," even though I didn't have it. Would he let me come home? Would he forgive me? I knew the answer. Liam wouldn't let that happen. He needed me gone. So I didn't call. Instead, I swallowed my pride and called the only person who might help. Jake. A lifeline. Jake and I weren't best friends. More like study buddies. We hung out sometimes, but we weren't close. Still, when he picked up the phone, I tried to sound casual. "Hey, I'm having some family issues. Do you think I could crash at your place for a few days? He didn't even hesitate. Yeah, dude, come over. I didn't know what to expect when I showed up at his house. His parents were nothing like mine. They didn't grill me for details. They didn't act like I was a burden. His mom just made up the couch with fresh sheets and handed me a pillow. His dad asked if I'd eaten. I hadn't, so they fed me. I almost broke down right there in their living room, just from the sheer shock of basic human kindness. After days of feeling like the world had thrown me away, someone actually cared. That night, after showering and eating a real meal for the first time in days, I finally told Jake everything. How Liam had framed me. How my dad had believed him without question. How Valeria had practically celebrated while I was thrown out. Jake listened, really listened. And for the first time since this nightmare started, I didn't feel completely alone. Rebuilding from nothing. I had to drop out of college. There was no way I could focus on classes while trying to figure out where I'd be sleeping next week. And without my dad's financial support, tuition was out of the question. So I started looking for work. Finding a job when you don't have an address is a nightmare. Every application asked for one. Every employer side-eyed me when I told them I just moved and didn't have a place yet. Eventually, I landed a warehouse job, loading trucks on the night shift. They didn't ask too many questions. As long as I could lift heavy stuff and show up on time, they didn't care where I lived. The pay was garbage, but it was a start. Jake's parents were saints, but I could tell they were starting to wonder how long I'd be staying. 2 weeks in, I overheard his dad asking, "How long do you think he'll need?" Not in a mean way, just concerned. That night, I counted my paychecks. I had just enough for a deposit on the shittiest studio apartment in town. The place was a dump. Roaches everywhere. A shower that went from freezing to scalding without warning. And the whole building smelled like the Chinese restaurant downstairs. But it was mine. Nobody could kick me out. Nobody could take it away. I moved in with nothing but 2 garbage bags full of clothes and a used mattress I got for $15 off Craigslist. That first night, I sat on that half-inflated mattress, eating cold ramen with no microwave, and just lost it. I cried. I hated myself for crying, but I couldn't stop. I was 20 years old, broke, alone, and completely starting over. And for the first time since getting kicked out, I realized how deep the damage really was. The grind begins. The warehouse job was killing me. 12-hour night shifts. Heavy lifting. Barely any sleep. My back hurt constantly. My hands were covered in cuts. My entire body ached from exhaustion. Most days, I'd get home, collapse onto my half-deflated mattress, and pass out before I even had the energy to eat. But I kept showing up, because the alternative was worse. I told myself I just needed to make it 1 month. 1 month of grinding. 1 month of saving. 1 month of proving to myself that I could survive on my own. But life had other plans. The breaking point. 3 months in, things got even worse. First, the warehouse cut back hours. My already pathetic paycheck got even smaller. Then, my apartment started falling apart, literally. There was a water leak in the ceiling. Black mold started growing. The landlord didn't care. Then, to top it all off, I got mugged walking home from work one night. Some guy grabbed me, punched me in the face, and ran off with my last $20. I was left in an alley with a busted lip, a black eye, and a sinking realization that I had nothing left to lose. I sat on my mattress that night, staring at the ceiling, thinking, maybe this is just my life now. Maybe I'll always be the guy barely scraping by. There's a weird kind of clarity that comes when you hit rock bottom. When you've lost everything, you realize you can either stay down or you can start climbing. And that's when Jake showed up with an idea that would change everything. The hustle that saved me. Jake knocked on my door late that night. When I opened it, he didn't even blink at my busted face. Instead, he walked in, dropped his backpack on the floor, and pulled out his laptop. "I've been working on something," he said, flipping the screen toward me. It was filled with designs, custom gaming controllers, skins, and accessories. "People pay good money for this stuff," he explained, "but I don't know how to set up a website, do orders, handle shipping." "You do." I frowned, confused. "What does this have to do with me?" Jake grinned. "What if we start a business?" I laughed so hard it hurt. I was working a job that barely covered rent, eating ramen straight from the packet because I couldn't afford a stove, and this guy thought I had the time and energy to start a company. But Jake didn't back down. Dude, what else are you going to do, he asked. Keep killing yourself at that warehouse until your back gives out? This could be something. I looked around my tiny, roach-infested apartment, at my empty bank account, and my bruised reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror. And I realized he was right. So I said, screw it. Let's try. What do I have to lose? Building from nothing. We started with nothing. A free website. Cheap materials. We pooled together what little money we had. Mostly cash I should have spent on actual food. The first month, we made $87. Split 2 ways. Not even enough to buy groceries. But for the first time in months, I had something to focus on. Something that wasn't just survival. The second month, we made $212. The third, $400. Orders started coming in consistently. Not a lot, but enough. Enough to make me realize that maybe, just maybe, this could actually work. The first big break. Around month 5, something huge happened. Jake had been sending free samples to gaming YouTubers, hoping one of them would feature our products. Most ignored us. But then, a guy with 100,000 subscribers posted a video showing off one of our controllers. Overnight, our orders exploded. We went from 10 orders a week to 40. I had to cut back my hours at the warehouse just to keep up. By month 6, we were making enough that I finally quit the warehouse job for good. By month 7, we rented a tiny workspace, basically a glorified storage unit with electricity. By month 8, I moved out of my roach-infested nightmare and into a real apartment. Nothing fancy, but clean. A bed, a desk, a life. For the first time since getting kicked out, I wasn't just surviving. I was winning. The call that changed everything. A year and a half after being thrown out, I was in the middle of a business meeting when my phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID and froze. It was him, my dad. I hadn't spoken to him since the night he threw me out like garbage. Jake noticed my expression. You okay? I barely heard him. The phone kept ringing. I could have ignored it. I wanted to ignore it. But something in me needed to know why he was calling. So I answered. Hello. His voice sounded rough. So, I need to see you. It's important. I almost laughed. Now, it was important. Now, after all this time, I wanted to tell him to go to hell. But there was something in his voice. Something desperate. And that made me curious. So I agreed to meet. And when I saw him the next day, I almost didn't recognize him. The fall of a father. I spotted him the second I walked in a coffee shop. And for a moment, I almost didn't recognize him. The confident, powerful man I had once looked up to, gone. In his place sat someone who looked 10 years older. His hair was grayer, his face thinner, and his eyes empty. For a long moment, he just stared at me. You look different, he finally said. I didn't respond. I just sat down and waited. I wanted to hear why he was here. I wanted to hear him say the words. He took a deep breath. Valeria is gone. I blinked. Not what I was expecting. She left 6 weeks ago, he continued, rubbing a hand over his face. I found out she'd been cheating on me. For years. I stayed silent. She was also stealing from me, he admitted. From a business. Tens of thousands. And before she left, she cleaned out our accounts. I just stared at him. The irony was so thick I could taste it. She took everything, he whispered, his voice breaking. Where's Liam? I asked. Dad let out a bitter laugh. He went with her at first, but they had some kind of falling out. Now he's been calling, begging me for money. I leaned back in my chair. So let me get this straight, I said slowly. The woman you chose over your own son lied to you, stole from you, and ran off. His face crumpled. And the son you trusted? The golden boy. I shook my head. Now he's using you for cash. He swallowed hard. Yeah, I should have felt satisfied. I should have felt vindicated. But all I felt was empty. The truth comes out. Then he dropped the real bombshell. When they left, he said, I found proof. I narrowed my eyes. Proof of what? Dad's hands shook as he pulled out his phone and showed me something. A screenshot. It was a text exchange between Liam and Valeria. Liam, the plan worked. He's out. That little sh*T's finally gone. Valeria, good. Less resistance now. Just keep playing along. I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. Then Dad scrolled to another screenshot. It was from Liam. To him, Liam, can't believe you actually fell for it, lol. That was way too easy. We took the money, dumbass. You kicked out the wrong son. I felt my stomach drop. Even after all this time, some part of me needed to hear my dad say it. I looked up at him. Well, I asked. His voice cracked. I was wrong about everything. There it was. But it was too little too late. The plea for help. Dad sighed, running a hand over his face. The business is failing, he admitted. The house is going into foreclosure. I've lost everything. I leaned back, crossing my arms. What do you want from me? He looked down. I need help, he said quietly. That made me laugh. A real laugh, not a fake one. You mean like I needed help? I shot back. Like when I was kicked out with nothing. When I was sleeping on a park bench. When I had to build my entire life from scratch while you ignore my calls. He flinched. I deserve that. Yeah, I said. You do. The ultimate question. Then I leaned forward. How does it feel, Dad? I asked, my voice calm. He swallowed. What? To have nowhere to go, I said. To be desperate. To have your life destroyed by someone you trusted. Tears welled in his eyes. I don't know what to say. I sat back. Now you know how I felt. Silence. For the first time in his life, my dad had nothing to say. Finally, I sighed. I'll think about it. That was all I could offer. And as I stood up to leave, I realized something. For the first time ever, the choice was entirely mine. The sweetest karma. 5 months passed after that conversation. I didn't let him move in with me. That was too much. But I gave him just enough money for a security deposit on a tiny apartment. And I got him a job at the same warehouse I had worked at. Poetic justice, right? Every day, I watched as he clocked in, exhausted, lifting heavy boxes, doing the same brutal work I had done just to survive. I didn't rub it in his face. I didn't have to. The look in his eyes told me he understood. Karma finally comes for Liam and Valeria. Then, 2 weeks ago, something wild happened. Dad got a call. I was in my office when he knocked on my door, his hands shaking. It's the police, he said. In Phoenix. They arrested Valeria and Liam. Turns out, they had tried to pull the same scam on Valeria's new boyfriend. They stole from his safe, except this time, he had security cameras. The cops had everything on tape. They searched Valeria's car and found stolen cash, fake IDs, and multiple credit cards in different names. Liam, true to form, threw his mother under the bus immediately. And when the police dug deeper, they found a storage unit filled with stolen goods, including, get this, my mother's missing jewelry. For years, Valeria had told Dad that I had stolen it, that I had sold it for drug money, and he believed her. Now, it was sitting in an evidence bag, and Liam had admitted to everything. The final decision. On the flight back from Phoenix, Dad broke down completely. Right there, in the middle of the plane, in front of strangers. I failed you, he sobbed. I failed your mother. I didn't say anything, because I still didn't know if I could forgive him. But when we landed, I made a decision. I told him he could stay with me, temporarily. Not forever, just until he figured things out. And so here we are now. He sleeps in my spare room, works at the warehouse. And every morning when I walk into my office, in my successful business, I see it in his eyes. The regret, the realization of everything he lost, of the son he almost threw away forever. Final thoughts. Looking back, if Liam had never framed me, my life would have been so different. I would have finished community college, gotten a boring job, spent my life in my dad's shadow. But getting kicked out, it forced me to build my own life. At 22, I own a successful business. I have a good apartment. I have respect. And most importantly, I have the power to decide who stays in my life. As for Dad, we take it day by day. Trust is like glass. Once it's shattered, you can glue it back together, but it will never be the same. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe for more real-life family dramas. Let me know in the comments what you think about today's story. Was it fair or totally messed up? See you in the next one.